Hi, welcome to the bathtub. This is the pre-plague edition of the bathtub. We're waiting for the coronavirus to come into San Luis Obispo, which is, I know it's not funny, but my wife every morning gets up and tells me how many people have got the coronavirus and how many people have died. So I figured I better start wearing this. This basically is just to prevent paint. This is for when you're spray painting your house. It stops you getting from paint. So I don't think it'll do anything about the coronavirus. It also, I realize, it makes me look like a character out of Outer Limits. Did you ever see Outer Limits, that TV show? This is the entirety of their special effects department when I was in the 60s, when I was a kid watching television. Outer Limits and it used to scare the shit out of me, too, see somebody wearing one of these. Makes you look like a serial killer. So I'm going to take this off because the worst part, I know I'm not going to survive the coronavirus because you can't drink wine and wear one of these damn things. It's just impossible. So I'm taking it off now, and I'm not going to wear it anymore. And like I said, I'm sure that we all know that Trump and Boris Johnson and Boris Putin and what's his name, Putin, are going to destroy the world before the coronavirus gets here. But it's a good day to talk about futuristic horrors, since we're basically, we're living in the futuristic horrors of my childhood with all the science fiction I used to read. And today we're inaugurating a new theme because we don't have enough themes on the bathtub show. This is a serious problem. So this one is going to be called Opposites Attract. And we're going to take kind of opposite ends of the spectrum and see how they kind of are equally fun. And the opposite ends we're going to finish up with last week. We talked about Philip K. Dick. Got lots of nice replies about him. He's kind of influenced. He's been a detriment and a positive influence to many of our childhoods and adolescences and even adulthoods. And we talked a little bit about the Unteleported Man, which is kind of a fun, screwed up early Philip K. Dick novel, which, by the way, we didn't finish saying was near the end of his life. Dick was revising this into something called Lies Incorporated. Perfect Dick title, Lies Incorporated, which through various permutations has been reprinted and published, finally, I think, in the proper edition. An old friend of mine, John Slottick, I believe, wrote a couple pages to fill in parts of the missing pages 30 years ago. But anyway, The Unteleported Man is kind of a good, early, messy Philip K. Dick book. And I thought we'd talk about the other end of the spectrum is the science fiction that I read in the 60s and 70s that I used to love is Arthur C. Clarke. He's the total opposite of Philip K. Dick, within the same genre. So Philip K. Dick wrote these books really quickly. Scientific accuracy, nothing, nada, no science. He just makes stuff up, such as the Unteleported Man. People can teleport across the galaxy, but they can't come back. He just pulled that out of his ass. That's just completely pulled out of his ass. Has nothing to do with science whatsoever. Arthur C. Clarke was a scientist, was a really interesting guy. Every time I read about Arthur C. Clarke or hear him interviewed, I like him quite a bit. He was a very interesting private, personable man who spent the closing years of his life in Sri Lanka. He loved to scuba dive. For most of you who haven't read him, he's best known for having written the script for 2001: A Space Odyssey, which I saw when I was, 14 in Cinerama, at a Cinerama theater, and I came out stoned because of that weird light thing. Had no idea what was happening and spent basically the rest of my life trying to figure out what the hell happened in 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's not a good indication of what Clarke is good at. And I will probably fail to tell you why I think he's good at things, but I just like him. And one of the books I most enjoyed when I was a teenager in high school, when I was reading Philip K. Dick, was Childhood's End. And there's these old Ballantine books. You can't get the new editions. This is just the beautiful, isn't that beautiful old cover? It was a book I read when I was like 15. I've read it a couple of times since. I hear that it's been turned into a mini-series somewhere, which I avoided. And the premise was that it was basically first contact with an alien culture that comes to Earth and tries to help Earthlings improve the fucking mess of their world. God knows we could use them. Unfortunately, the people who come down here, these aliens, look like the devil. I think they have pointed tails and wings. I'm not sure. But it's been a long time since I've read it. And everything I read of his, this was one of the better ones, had a sense that it wasn't like being pulled out of his ass. He actually would sort of work within some framework, which was not completely ridiculous. He's a really, in terms of the opposite of Philip K. Dick, who could be stylistically, who can stylistically can be quite smart sometimes. There are really lovely passages in Philip K. Dick. Clarke is a much more controlled prose writer and a really good prose writer, and I really like reading his work. It's a bit cold, it's a bit detached, but it's still quite absorbing. He's also a good narrative technician, and his books are really well worked out. So if you haven't read Childhood's End, I really recommend it. When he started off, Arthur C. Clarke, I got the two of them, used to write a lot of stuff he worked for John Campbell too. Remember, we do Footsteps of Astounding every once in a while. One of his early books is called Against the Fall of Night, which is this kind of John W. Campbell did this amazing story called, I think it's called Night. Don't forgive me if I'm wrong, which is about a million years in the future when civilization is actually dying. And it's a really haunting, weird story, and you can sort of see the influence on a book like Against the Fall of Night. These are sometimes classified as science fantasies. They're not at all like the books that Clarke is probably best at. But his early books have these kind of far futuristic, end of eternity feel about them. They're well written, they're kind of haunting, and they're strange stories. And Against the Fall of Night is about a man, I can't remember exactly the premise, but it's about a man who wakes up and says, well, gee, why don't we look at all the scientific devices around us, why don't we forgot how to use them. Many people have written in about Gene Wolfe. We're fans of Gene Wolfe in the Bathtub. These books are these are the books that clearly influenced Gene Wolfe, and it was later revised as The City and the Stars. So it's not Ballantine, but the old Signets with probably Richard Powers is a longer version of this. Arthur C. Clarke several times in his career went back and reworked old ideas, and this is just as good. I just as much like the original shorter version. Fountains of Paradise I've never read, but I will. One of the books I loved as a teenager was Rendezvous with Rama. I haven't read this book in 50 years. The premise was that, again, some weird spaceship comes floating in from outer space, and it's empty. And a bunch of astronauts go out, I think from various countries, I'm not sure, and they go and they explore this spaceship as it goes around the sun and then makes a loop off into eternity and never comes back. It's a really haunting book. And it was one of the first times I read a science fiction book which doesn't try to answer all the questions it raises, like who were these people, what kind of creatures were they, blah, 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 and we never meet those creatures. It's just this kind of sense of enigmatic, amazing strangeness of the universe. And it's a really well-written book, as I recall. Okay, I never read 2001: A Space Odyssey, but I keep thinking I will. He's very good at short stories. Very good at short stories. And here's another one of those great old These are beautiful old books. Those beautiful old Ballantines. And they would reissue all his books. I think this has one of his earliest books. Rescue Party, which is sort of the early space opera version of Arthur C. Clarke, where he's not really worried about being believable. And the premise is that a bunch of aliens come to Earth. Earth is dying. Clarke is very interested in the notion of a dying planet. Earth is a dying planet. And these aliens come to try to save the Earthlings. And they go through this civilization that's left behind. And it's a very, again, haunting, strange, imagination-arousing story, which I reread again just last week to do this piece. I haven't read Imperial Earth, but the one I read this week, I really need to get better production people in here, is this, The Songs of Distant Earth. Now, this is one I'd never read before. It's a late Clarke. It's, again, a revision of a long story he wrote, I think under the same title. I have it here somewhere. The Songs of Distant Earth. And this is where we start to get into these. It's a sort of science fantasy of this kind of futuristic world, but it's a little more constrained by reality. For example, we never get faster than light travel. because by the time Clarke wrote this, it would seem to be impossible that people could go just gallivanting across the stars like in A. Van Vogt stars. And the premise is that the Earth is dying, again, a dying Earth, and so they send out these seedling ships, and they send out a bunch of seedling ships which actually go to planets, build a society, and then raise embryos and create and to save humanity, to bring humanity. So it doesn't save people, just saves the genetic substance of humanity, and creates these futuristic colonies all across the galaxy or across so and so. Then, after they send out these seedling stars, this is a really interesting idea. They find a way to actually transport human beings, and just as the planet's dying. So what you have is a story of basically two cultures. The seedling children, these people that were raised, they're kind of almost Eloi-ish. They're sort of innocent. They've always been raised in this kind of perfect society. And then you have these people who come from Earth later, and they stop there to get water for their transport devices. I don't know. And it's just to basically, again, it's like Rendezvous with Rama, just the interchange of these two civilizations. I really enjoyed it. And again, it's well written. It's much more anchored than a Philip K. Dick book, which just goes all over the hell of the place. And Clarke is a good stylist. He's actually a good story writer. Here's one more beautiful old. That's one of the, I think maybe the first edition of an Arthur C. Clarke collection from Ballantine. That must be the 50s. Those are beautiful covers. Okay, I'm not going to talk much more. I really love Arthur C. Clarke, and it was fun kind of going back to, I haven't read him in an organized fashion for quite a while, so I read a couple of his books. Totally different from Philip K. Dick, but I can't imagine you wouldn't like both. They're both very different writers, and if you've read one, you should try the other, and vice versa. All right, happy birthday. I'm going to go back outside. I got to go to the, I got to go get another bottle of wine. So I'll be heading out now, and we'll try to do one more of these tonight. And happy bathing. Talk to you soon.